Now, this one portion you can look in the camera.
Okay.
And go ahead and introduce yourself, first and last name, the school we're at, and the grade, and what you taught today, what type of math.
My name is Diana Bernardo. I am a second grade teacher at Frank A. Berry Elementary School in Bethel, Connecticut. I teach second grade, and I did a math lesson focusing on rewriting addition problems vertically in order to solve them.
Awesome. Okay, so eyeline is there. All right, so we'll go to the first question. We want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. First question, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
How does this lesson connect to and build on their prior skills and knowledge? Well, since the beginning of the year, we began focusing on place value strategies and for the students to understand hundreds, tens, and ones, the value of the digits in each place. And then we began using fluency practice, and students learned different strategies to add and to subtract with single-digit numbers within 20. And then we transitioned over to double-digit addition, which is where we are now. And so the focus of today's lesson, I built upon what they learned with place value, and I had the students just review hundreds place, tens place, and ones place, and how when they add, and if the number is more than 9, they're going to have to regroup, and when they regroup, it's 110 and then a certain number of ones. And so we reviewed that at the beginning of the lesson. And during today's lesson, they used place value and understanding of how they need to line up the ones place and the tens place in order to add correctly. And as well as they had to regroup tens when their number was more than 9 when they were adding in the ones place. And then actually, can I add to that?
Sure.
Oh. And in the future, the students need to understand this because they're going to have to do this with 2-digit subtraction as well. And then once we get into 3-digit addition and 3-digit subtraction, they're going to have to apply these place value skills that they've learned into the hundreds place. And this will also help them when they go into 3rd and 4th grade and they begin multiplying.
Good. Let's see here. Discuss the sequence of the lessons that surround this one lesson.
Well, we started off this unit with different strategies to add numbers together, especially 2-digit plus 2-digit numbers. And so first we used place value strategies such as expanding numbers and breaking them up into tens and ones. And now we're going into the standard algorithm where they have to line up the tens and the ones and show their regrouping and model the steps that they're using when they're adding 2-digit numbers.
Good, you're doing great. Second question. Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
Okay, I'm going to have to look at my notes now.
Okay. Space. Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
The standard or cluster targeted in this lesson was numbers and operations in base 10. Specifically, they had to use place value understanding in order to add and subtract within 100. And in this lesson, I used the place value understanding by bringing up their prior knowledge and activating it so that they could understand that they had to add the ones first, and then they would have to, at times, regroup ones into the tens place. And I lost my train of thought.
You want to take it from the top, or you want to? So the ones in 10 place.
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. And then what was the rest of the question?
What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard
okay.
or cluster?
I'll just take it from.
Perfect.
In order to have the lesson reflect that standard, I reviewed place value skills before I taught them how to rewrite their addition problems. And then the students understood that place value was helping them in order to add 2-digit numbers vertically.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified, and how did you plan for this?
Okay, I'm going to have to look at my notes.
Okay.
Sorry. Should I say core action 2 and then say what core action 2 is, or?
You can, whatever feels comfortable for you.
All right, I'll probably forget what it is, so can I just say core action 2?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified?
I think the lesson best exemplified core action indicator number 2, and that's because the instructional practices that I used helped the students to really understand the lesson. For example, I explicitly modeled what they had to do when they were adding each place, and it was very important for me to connect the blocks to their addition so they can see that transition when they're adding ones and then regrouping to the tens place. I also asked a question so the students were able to explain their thinking, and students did get their answers in different ways, and it was important for them to be able to explain the strategies that they used. Children were given time to work on these problems independently. This way they can practice what was taught during the lesson. And then at the end, I did go back to the focus of the lesson, and it was important for the students to understand again how understanding place value is able to help them add 2-digit numbers and what can happen if they don't line up their numbers correctly.
We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your classroom. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
How does this lesson illustrate the shifts required by the Common Core? Well, Common Core requires, I need to stop.
It's a good start.
Can I pick up from like?
I would just.
So, in this lesson, the Common Core shifts that were exemplified, I believe, were that there was a focus on the standards and the students using their understanding of place values and operations in order to add and to subtract, and as well as coherence, because this lesson built upon place value concepts that were taught at the beginning of the year. And I told the students why they needed to know this, and it also connected to where they're going to go in the future with this and how they're going to use this when they add and subtract with 3-digit numbers and eventually with multiplication. And the rigor was in the fluency practice. It's very important to incorporate fluency practice, especially connected to what the students will be doing that day. I specifically chose place value practice and adding ones, and for the students to tell me how, for example, the number 12, 1 10, and 2 1s, they would have to explain that when they're adding, because when they are adding 2-digit numbers with the standard algorithm, they're going to have to regroup 1 10 and 2 1s. And then the students will apply these skills once they're reading word problems.
How did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
I think it's all, well, how did I teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? I believe it's the same as how I always taught it, because it's very important for them to relate, if they're using relate those concrete models that they're using to the addition and even to the subtraction that they're doing. So it's just more with focusing on those standards and narrowing it down, and instead of just teaching addition with the standard algorithm, really breaking it down, teaching them different strategies that they can use to solve their problems, as opposed to just teaching them the procedure and just teaching them how to add with the standard algorithm. It's very important that they understand what is happening when they make that exchange of 1s and 10s, and they have that conceptual understanding, so this way they can apply different strategies when solving problems independently.
Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensure that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. How did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson, and how do you know?
How did the students handle the lesson, and how did they understand the mathematics? I believe that they did actually understand this very well. They have been working on 2-digit addition. However, problems that they were given were already written for them in the standard algorithm form, which is writing the numbers vertically. So in this case, they had to rewrite it and line it up on their own. They were very engaged, and they knew that this is something that they're going to use in the future. And I think that telling them why they need to know it and how they're going to use it in the future keeps them engaged, and it keeps them focused on what they should be doing. And this way they practice a new strategy that they can have once they're adding independently. I don't know if that made sense. Okay.
It's all edited down
Okay.
anyways. Okay. Explain how you differentiated in this lesson. Did all students have opportunities to work on grade level content? If all students did not have this opportunity, please explain why.
How did I differentiate in this lesson? All the students worked on grade level content. All of the students had the same problems to work on. However, I do have a diverse classroom, and I do have students that are English language learners. I have special ed students in the classroom. So it's very important to be able to give each student the opportunity to show me in their own way that they're able to solve these problems. And so for some of the students, I gave them their work with the lines drawn so they knew that they had to separate the tens and the ones, and this just helped them to line up the problems correctly. And there were students who I did not need to differentiate for, who actually wanted to draw the lines and just make sure that they were lining them up correctly. I also gave students that needed a bit of a challenge. When they were finished with their work, they were given addition problems where there was a sum given and only one of the addends, and they had to figure out what the missing addend was, which requires higher order thinking skills, because at times, in order to get the sum, they would have had to regroup with adding the ones. So they really had to figure out which addend was missing, but they also had to think, would I have to regroup with this problem? And I believe that they did an excellent job with the lesson, and I think that they're going to continue to do this, and they're going to be able to apply it when working independently, especially with word problems.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson, and what actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Okay, now I have to stop.
Sure.
Am I too serious?
Rolling. And again, which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson?
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? Well, the students were given opportunities to use different strategies, and I really noticed that they were using these mathematical practices independently. They were talking about their work with each other. They were able to elaborate when they were explaining how they solved the problem. I noticed that many students were using mathematical terms such as the tens place, the ones place, the value, digits. I also noticed that students were talking about each other's work, and there were a few students who looked at their partner's work and noticed that there was something missing or that they needed to change an answer, and they were explaining to each other without giving the answer how they should change their thinking. And then there were students whose answers were not correct as I was going around, and they were able to look and decide, okay, this is what I need to do in order to change my thinking. Hold on, I think I might want to... and they were also using mathematical tools appropriately. They were using the tens blocks and the ones, and even though not all of them needed to use them, some of the students who did were using it so they could make that connection between that conceptual understanding of what's happening when they're regrouping and adding ones and regrouping to tens.
Would you like to comment on any of the students' submitted work? Was there something that delighted or surprised you?
I have a student who, would I like to comment on any of the student work? I do have a student who is an English language learner, and I was very impressed by the way she explained her thinking. She explained step by step how she lined up the ones in the ones place and the tens in the tens place, and then how she added ones when solving a problem, and then she had to regroup the tens. And so I was very impressed that she took what she's learned in the past and she was applying it with today's lesson, and as well, she also did write her problems vertically the way I taught them at the beginning of the lesson.
Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
What worked well in this lesson is, I think that having the students, what worked well in this lesson was, I think that giving the students the option to use a place value chart where they can add the ones and model the regrouping and then refer back to the written method and show how they're regrouping tens in the written method. I think it gives them the option that they can use those manipulatives, and I think it's great that there were students that did not need to use it, and there were students that were solving the problems without even rewriting them because they were using those mental strategies that I had taught in previous lessons. So I think it's great that they know there's not just one way to solve a problem, and I think that's what's important, especially with the Common Core. There's many different ways to get an answer. It's just how they explain their thinking. That's how you can really tell that they understand the focus of the lesson.
Last question. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
No. So I think
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Great job.
Okay.
You did awesome.
Oh my God.